Ashton Kutcher is trying to save his career after Danny Masterson, but now he's being accused of being responsible for a murder. In the 2000s, Ashton Kutcher briefly dated Ashley Ellerin, who was found murdered at the age of 22. The person who killed her was serial killer Michael Gargillo, who stabbed her 47 times and was known as the Hollywood Ripper. The night she was killed, Ashton Kutcher went to pick her up for a date, finding the lights were on in the house, but she wasn't answering the door or her phone. Ashton Kutcher claimed he didn't know she was killed and instead looked through the window to see red stuff on her carpet, but thought it was just a wine.
The LAPD themselves determined that Ashton was lying about what he saw, didn't see, didn't do at the crime scene. And it was immensely intense.
So, it turns out that Ashton Kutcher lied to the police about the living of his ex-girlfriend, Ashley Ellerin, because allegedly he was covering up for some very important people who didn't want the truth to come out. According to reports, Ashley, who was a fashion student at the time, unfortunately found out some disturbing truths about certain important figures in the industry. I'm talking real shady stuff that would have ruined the lives of many of the industry's power brokers if it ever came to light. So, of course, they had to do something about it, and Ashton just happened to be perfectly positioned to help this shady plan come to light. But, as y'all know, nothing stays hidden forever, especially when it has to do with the industry. And get this, Ashton is losing his mind right now because he knows there's no way he can wiggle himself out of this, not when there's footage showing exactly what happened and his role in covering it up. Trust me, you're in for a wild ride with this one because the details will have your jaw on the floor. So, without further ado, let's get into it. It all started back in February 2001, when 23-year-old Ashton Kutcher started going out with his friend, 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin. Ashley was a fashion student looking to become a celebrity designer, while Ashton was a budding actor making a name for himself in some Hollywood circles. Ashton and Ashley had been going out for a few weeks when he asked her to be his date for some Hollywood party on February 21st. Around 8:24 p.m., Ashton called her to let her know he was running late. According to him, he remembered the time so accurately because Ashley was using her friend's phone since hers was faulty. I recall the time because our phones were very old, and I showed the detective the phone number of the friend, and it said 8:24 p.m. By 10 p.m., he called Ashley and her friend again, but they didn't respond. By the time he got to her house, it was around 10:30 p.m. Ashton claimed he found the security gate open, which was weird to him because the front door was locked. After knocking and knocking with no response, Ashton just assumed that Ashley had left for the party with her friends since he didn't show up on time. He also said he would have done more to find out about her whereabouts, but he didn't want to appear overeager since he was trying to date her. However, he also found it odd that all the lights were on in the house, even though it looked like nobody was there. I thought it odd the lights were all on. I didn't want to be the guy looking through her window, but since all the alarm bells were going off in my head, I decided to take a sneak peek through the windows to see if someone was inside. That's when he saw what he thought was red wine on the carpet. The whole house looked scattered, and Ashton thought the wine must have spilled on the carpet from a party. So, he left and went to the party by himself. It wasn't until the following day that he found out Ashley had been brutally attacked in her home, and her roommate had found her lifeless on the floor. Ashton immediately contacted the police because his fingerprints were on her door, and he admitted that he was freaking out.
Tool called Spotlight. It's a neural net. It gets smarter over time. It gets better and it gets more efficient as people use it.
Hollywood Ripper was found guilty and sentenced to death in a trial that included Kutcher's testimony. According to People, Kutcher contacted police the day after Ellerin's murder. Knowing he had been at the scene of the crime, he said on the witness stand, "My fingerprints are on this door, and I was freaking out. I told an officer, 'Let me tell you what happened.'" But here's where it gets shady. See, this story isn't exactly the truth. In fact, this story was fabricated by Ashton and his PR team after the fact because they knew what really happened to Ashley, and they didn't want it to blow back on Ashton or any of his friends. So, what really went down on that fateful night? Well, it's a lot scarier than you think. Ashton got to Ashley's house around 10:30 p.m., found the security gate open, knocked on the front door, and got no response. But what he conveniently left out of his story is that he actually went inside the house and saw Ashley's lifeless body on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Authorities later discovered that she had 47 stab wounds. Ashton panicked and ran out of the house to his car, which was sitting in the driveway. He then allegedly spent the next hour losing his mind, calling his manager, his PR team, and friends, asking them what to do. His team eventually advised him to leave the house immediately, go to the party as planned, and not breathe a word about his discovery to anyone else. And that's exactly what he did. See, back in 2001, Ashton Kutcher was not yet a household name in Hollywood. Even the sitcom that shot him to the limelight, that 70s show, was only a few years old at the time. Ashton needed to keep his image spotless in the media, and getting linked to the brutal unaliving of a young woman he was dating was not a good look. I mean, his DNA was all over the place, and his fingerprints were at the scene. Plus, he had already been at the scene for an hour, crashing out in his car. So, despite the fact that a woman he called his friend, and he was romantically interested in, had just been unlived in cold blood, he didn't call the police. Instead, he went to the party and forgot about the whole thing until the following day, when the police started their investigation. It would turn out that Ashton didn't actually go to the police himself after hearing about the incident. According to LAPD sources, investigators actually reached out to Ashton first since he was one of the last people to speak with Ashley before she was unlived. He was also brought in for 3 separate interrogations during the course of this investigation. But here's the twist. The investigators could tell right from the beginning that Ashton was lying through his teeth. I mean, his story just wasn't adding up. It was weird enough that he didn't immediately contact the police after noticing all the red flags at Ashley's house the night before. But what was even crazier was that Ashton's claim that he saw wine on the floor, which he now believed must have been blood, was just not true. When investigators went back to Ashley's house to retrace Ashton's steps that day, they discovered that Ashton couldn't possibly have seen any blood or wine from the window he claimed to have been standing at. So why would Ashton tell such an obvious lie in the middle of an investigation into the death of someone he claimed to love? Well, it all goes back to his friends Danny Masterson and Diddy. A few years ago, an actress named Chrissy Bixler put Ashton on blast and made some shocking statements about him.
Are
She
aware
said,
of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual abuse.
Dear Ashton, I know the secrets your role model keeps for you, ones that would end you. Did you forget I was there? You were on speakerphone that night. You called Danny on February 21, 2001. I heard everything. I heard the plan. In my opinion, you're just as sick as your mentor. Chrissy followed up with this even crazier comment, saying, yes, he was in the car for over an hour outside of Ashley's house, speaking with his manager about what to do to protect Ashton's career and reputation. He then called Danny. I heard the entire conversation. Law enforcement was and is aware that what I'm saying is true. For context, Chrissy Bixler was dating Danny Masterson back in 2001, and she would later accuse him of sexually assaulting her along with 2 other women. If y'all recall, Ashton and his wife, Mila Kunis, sent a letter to the judge after Danny was found guilty of multiple counts of rape, asking for a lighter sentence for him. It didn't make sense at the time because Ashton had spent decades building his image as a good guy, you know, a decent person who fights for women and children, especially victims of trafficking and sexual assault. He and his ex-wife, Demi Moore, co-founded Thorn, an organization dedicated to fighting child trafficking and sexual assault. He was giving speeches all over the world about how important it is to prevent abuse and ensure victims are supported and protected. So, coming out to defend a guy found guilty of sexually assaulting multiple women was really weird, and fans weren't having it. The backlash was swift, and Ashton was forced to retire from Thorn. He and Mila then dropped this apology video that looked completely fake.
Our relationship was really bizarre. So it started over punked, because he was like, yo,
don't punk
you
me.
can't punk me. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Everybody's on the table. He's like, not me, I'm off the table. And so that started our conversation. We became fast friends, and we used to just hang out, watch football together. And he came over, and I was like, I'm going for a run. He's like, oh, I'll go for a run with you. And so he comes over to go for a run. about halfway through the run, he's like, yo, I'm running out of gas right now. But we had like paparazzi all around us at the time. He's like, you got to slow down but make it look like you're not slowing down.
Because he had to
I don't
look.
want to look like I'm not going to be able to finish this thing. And he was losing it, right? Like he was like me right now with the wings and the heat's starting to kick up. And he's like,
However, a lot of people were convinced that Ashton wouldn't risk everything for Danny Masterson just because of their friendship. They believed Danny had to have something over Ashton to do that, and as it turns out, they were right. See, Danny Masterson was a respected Scientologist before his conviction, and one thing the Scientology community is known for is gathering intel on people, including embarrassing, hurtful, or illegal things, to use to control them. Another thing the Scientology community is known for is protecting their own,
Respected Scientologists like
During
Will
Danny's
and Jada
trial,
Smith.
the prosecution revealed that Danny drugged women's drinks so he could sexually assault them, then relied on his prominence in the Church of Scientology to avoid consequences for years. But wait, it gets worse. Because you know who else had very strong ties to the Scientology community? None other than Diddy. Diddy had been close friends with respected Scientologists like Will and Jada Smith. But when he saw how much he could benefit from the community, he decided to make more friends there, without going full Scientology mode. Enter Ashton Kutcher. Ashton and Diddy first met in the early 2000s when Ashton was the host of Punk'd and Diddy was running his show Making the Band. They hit it off immediately, and their friendship quickly grew into a real bromance. It didn't take long for them to introduce each other to their other friend groups, which is how Diddy became friends with Danny Masterson. Now, around this time, Danny was already a certified creep, so he and Diddy were a match made in heaven.
LAPD was like, this guy is lying. Another detail. It's not that the LAPD never caught the guy. It's that they couldn't prosecute him. Because Ashton's lies created reasonable doubt. The LAPD did catch the guy that they believed was the killer. They couldn't prosecute him. The defense would have made mincemeat out of the prosecution because here you had Ashton Kutcher found guilty. I know that's not the right words to be used. He wasn't found guilty. Determined by the investigators to have been lying about his presence at the crime scene. How can you possibly successfully prosecute someone when you have someone who was literally at the crime scene, whose fingerprints are at the crime scene? We're talking about Ashton Kutcher, whose DNA is at the crime scene, who lied about being there. Makes him look guilty. Now, nobody thinks Ashton Kutcher was guilty of that crime, but it's why they couldn't prosecute Gargiulo. Was it Michael Gargiulo? That is how I know Ashton Kutcher sat outside his house for an hour calling people, his manager, his agent, friends, Danny Masterson. That is how I know that instead of calling the police, Ashton took the advice of his team and the advice of Danny to go to the party by yourself. The party that you and Ashley were going to go to together, go by yourself, make up a story. You went to her house. You checked the door. It was locked. She wasn't there. She wasn't answering your phone calls. You looked in the window. You saw something. It was red. You thought it was wine. I mean, even as you hear the story now, you're like, that's obviously a bullshit story, right? Yeah, because it is a bullshit story.
Our relationship was really bizarre. So it started over Punk'd because he was like, yo, don't punk me. You can't punk me. And I was like, I don't want to tell you, everybody's on the table. He's like, not me. I'm off the table. And so that started our conversation. We became fast friends and used to just hang out, watch football together. One time, he came over and I was like, I'm going for a run. He was like, oh, I'll go for a run with you. So he comes over to go for a run. About halfway through the run, he's like, yo, I'm running out of gas right now. But we had paparazzi all around us at the time, and he's like, you gotta slow down but make it look like you're not slowing down. I don't want to look like I'm not going to be able to finish this thing, and he was losing it, right? Like, he was like me right now with the wings and the heat starting to kick up, and he's like...
Some people have been really going after Chrissy hard this afternoon. And it's not quite clear to me whether some of these people are members of Ashton's team, putting the fear of God into Chrissy, that Ashton will be suing her or could sue her. And I wanted to make something very, very clear.
They started attending freak-offs together, and Ashton even sometimes hosted some of Diddy's white parties, where all sorts of disturbing things went down. In recent weeks, rumors have been floating around that it was at one of these parties that Ashley, who was also a close friend of Ashton's, allegedly stumbled upon some disturbing information that would have implicated Danny Masterson, Diddy, and a bunch of their Scientology friends. So the next obvious step was that Ashley had to go. Now,